Hello and welcome to episode 10 of the LFS podcast with me, Kevin Ferris. This week on the show, the Premier League officially comes to an end this weekend. Who will get relegated and who will stay 7th for European football? That's all coming up on this week's LFS podcast. Hello and welcome back. Episode 10 of the podcast now, and we have coming up this week the final week of the Premier League. And what a weekend it is set up to be. All 10 matches live on the one kick-off time, 4:30 on Sunday afternoon. And I'll have all of those covered for you on LFS this weekend, including the relegation battle, the European battle, and also all the other games and the goals as they go in. So do not miss it this weekend. It's going to be a cracker of Premier League football on the final day. And we're going to look ahead to this weekend and the big stories that can still emerge on the final day. And the biggest one is the relegation battle. Now, there are 3 teams in the relegation battle still bidding to stay in one spot to remain in the Premier League. 2 of those 3 teams will be relegated this Sunday. The 3 teams are Everton, Leicester and Leeds. And only one of those can survive. Now, only 7 times in Premier League history has a team started the final day in the bottom 3 and escaped. The most recent of those teams was Leeds last season when they stayed up against Brentford on the final day with that win at the GTEC Community Stadium to send Burnley down into the Championship, of course. Now, it's only happened 6 other previous occasions, so it's not a very common occurrence for a team to survive on the final day. That will be comfort to Everton fans who are currently outside the bottom 3 by 2 points. Leicester and Leeds need to hope that Everton do drop points on the final day if they're to survive. And I'm going to chat through all 3 fixtures that they will have this weekend. What are the likelihoods of them winning those games and the outcomes and the permutations that could have on their final positions in the table. So I'll put the permutations up first then. So the permutations for the relegation battle are as follows. Everton will be safe if they beat Bournemouth. Regardless of result at Leicester or Leeds, Everton win and they will be safe. They will have 36 points and they will be uncatchable. However, Leicester will survive if they win against West Ham and Everton fail to beat Bournemouth. Regardless of the Leeds result, if Leicester win and Everton fail to win, then that means that Leicester will survive. Now, Everton can fail to win. That is either a draw or a loss. It doesn't really matter for Leicester as they have a better goal difference than Everton. Everton won't be able to catch that anyway, so that the better goal difference helps Leicester out there. In terms of Leeds, they would need a proper miracle, to be honest. Leeds will stay up if they win against Spurs at home and both Leicester and Everton fail to win. Now, there's a slight clause to that. Leicester would have to draw or lose. It doesn't really matter because they're both on the same points, Leeds and Leicester. It wouldn't really matter what the draw or loss is for Leicester as long as they don't win. And Everton can still draw and Leeds would stay up, but the Leeds need to improve their goal difference by 4 somehow. That's scoring 4 goals against Spurs without response. If they are to do that with Everton drawing, but ideally Leeds would need both Leicester and Everton to lose and them to win for them to stay up, which would be a proper story if it were to happen. Of course, second successive season for Leeds to stay up on the final day if that was the case. Right then, I'm going to go through then after we've seen those permutations. I'll go through the European permutations later in the podcast. But first, I'm going to go to Everton Bournemouth. Now, this is the big game that's going to be the big focus because nothing really happens if Everton win. You know, if Everton win, they're safe. Leeds and Leicester are getting relegated. So that's why it's the key game on Sunday. It's the big game. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen at Goodison Park. Well, Everton are in the driving seat in terms of safety, sitting 2 points above relegation, with Leicester and Leeds both on 31 points and needing to win their final game and hope that Everton draw or lose against Bournemouth. That has only happened once in the fixture's Premier League history, with Bournemouth only ever winning once away at Everton, with all 4 of Everton's wins against Bournemouth in the Premier League coming at Goodison Park. Despite that, Bournemouth have won their last 3 meetings between the two and scored 3 goals in all 3 matches, both home and away. Everton's last win against Bournemouth came in January 2019 when they won 2-0 at Goodison Park. In terms of form, Bournemouth have lost their last 3 Premier League games with seemingly nothing to play for, having secured safety a few weeks ago. Everton have some big results in the last 3, winning against Brighton 5-1 away at Brighton and a draw against Wolves with that last minute equaliser, both results coming away from home. Now, in terms of this, I was quite surprised to see the form or the recent results being the way it was. Everton only winning 4 of 11 games in the Premier League against Bournemouth. Bournemouth winning more games in the Premier League against Everton than Everton have won against them. Bournemouth's first ever win away at Everton in the Premier League came in their last visit to Goodison Park. They won 3-1. So Bournemouth have a pretty good record against Everton, but the big question is, in those seasons, Bournemouth have had relegation to fight against, and they've had something to play for in those games. So they've kind of needed to get results. Whereas the final day, they're safe. They're going to be in the Premier League next season, no matter what. They don't really need anything. Bournemouth. They're going away to Everton. They're probably going to play a reserve team. Probably. There's going to need to be a miracle for Everton not to win. But then again, you never know. That's the joys of the Premier League and how unpredictable it is at times. But I do think Everton are in a probably the best position that they could be in. Really, they're home against a team. They're at home, great home record. Well, under Sean Dyche, it's a pretty good home record, and Goodison Park has been key to their safety in previous seasons. Of course, last season under Frank Lampard, they got some big wins at home. But they're against a side that doesn't have anything to play for. It would be different if they were against a side that had something to play for on the final day. If it was a true relegation fight. If Everton and Bournemouth were both bidding against relegation, then it would be a much more even contest, I would say. But Everton have the leg up at the minute, they have the advantage, and it'd be interesting to see if Bournemouth could do anything, but you never know. And of course, yes, Everton are at home, and all these things are going for them, but at the same time, they just haven't been able to pick up good enough results in over the season to see them out of this position and to see them clear of this, because the form has been too poor, just not been good enough. And that's been the common case from all of these teams. They just have been really rubbish. The records of these teams are atrocious, and that's exactly why they are where they are. So yes, Everton might be at home and might have a good record and a good, backing at home, but it doesn't guarantee them a good result. And their last home game, yes, it was against Manchester City, so that's kind of not a point to make. But at the same time, it's not going to be an easy one. It's not going to be an easy one, despite them having all the advantages of the 3 teams. It's still going to be a tough task for Everton. Bournemouth are certainly not going to roll over, I would say. Although it's the final day and they've nothing to play for, I don't think they're just going to roll over and say, you know what, here's the 3 points. I don't think they're going to do that. Moving on to the next game then, Leicester against West Ham. Now next up is Leicester, and Dean Smith will need a final day favour if Leicester to remain a Premier League side. They need to win against West Ham at the King Power Stadium and hope that Everton fail to win against Bournemouth, with Leicester's goal difference being superior to the Merseyside clubs. In their 31 previous meetings, Leicester have won just 10 against West Ham, with 5 at home and 5 away. West Ham, however, have won 14, with 5 of which coming at Leicester's home ground. A draw would be a non-result for Leicester, as it would not be enough for them to secure safety, with the result coming just 7 times in this fixture over the years. West Ham more than likely have their eyes on the upcoming European final on the 7th of June and will be unwilling to risk players for effectively a dead rubber game for them, with safety already secured for David Moyes' side. The last meeting between the two at the King Power Stadium ended in a 2-2 draw in February of 2022. West Ham have won 4 of their other last 5 at both the London Stadium and the King Power Stadium. Leicester's last win against West Ham came in January 2020, 6 games ago in the head-to-head, winning 4-1 at the King Power Stadium. In terms of form, Leicester are in a difficult position for a win, having won just 1 of their last 15 Premier League games, which was a 2-1 win against Wolves in April. West Ham have lost all of their last 3 away games, though, against Brentford, Man City and Crystal Palace, with their last 2 wins coming at home against Leeds and Manchester United. So this is an interesting one. I think in terms of who's got the best chance, in terms of if Everton just slip up between Leicester and Leeds, who's got the best chance? It's definitely Leicester, because Leicester have a better goal difference than Everton. So if Everton fail to win, Leicester can really pounce on that. They're playing a team that has nothing to play for in West Ham. They've got a European final to worry about, and they don't want to have injured players for that European final. You know, first European final in 47 years for West Ham. They're not going to want to give that up and risk too many players before that game in case, you know, they put themselves in a really difficult position for that final. So they're not going to do that. And that's why I think Leicester might have a good game here too. Although 1 win in 15 is pretty dire. Pretty dire, that is. It's a terrible, terrible record when you're trying to stay against relegation. 1 win in 15 is horrendous. But again, as I said, dead rubber basically for West Ham. They'll probably play reserve team. They'll not really care about the result much, really. I'm sure David Moyes will not say that, but it won't mean a big deal for them. As you can see in the table, they're 14th for West Ham. They're 9 points, well clear of relegation. They've been safe for a good 2 weeks or so. After I think the Manchester United win really solidified that for them in recent weeks. That win against Manchester United at home, West Ham. But in terms of Leicester, I think they have a very good chance. If Everton fail to win against Bournemouth, they have a very, very good chance of staying up. And they've got really threatening players, the likes of Jamie Vardy, James Maddison, Harvey Barnes, Kelechi Iheanacho, Patson Daka. They really do have attackers that can win them games. You know, Leicester haven't relied on a good defensive structure all season. They've been shambles at the back all season, Leicester. That's probably why they are where they are. It's the goals that they've scored is saving them at the minute. Now look at the goal difference. Minus 18 for Leicester going into this match day. That's 6 better off than Everton and 9 better off than Leeds. So that puts them in a better position if Everton do drop points. You know, look, Leicester can pounce on it. Because if Everton draw and Leicester win, Leicester will stay up on goal difference. It's as simple as that, and that's what would have saved them this season is the goals that they've scored. And that's been one thing that a lot of people have said. Leicester will stay up because they've got goal scorers. Clearly, that's not good enough at the Premier League at the moment because they're in the position of the third bottom of the league. They're in the relegation zone going into the final day, hoping for a possible favour from Everton, or from Bournemouth, sorry, against Everton for them to try and save their season. A win would mean nothing if Everton don't drop points, and that's basically what it comes down to for Leicester. Well, moving on from a possible chance of staying up to an almost minuscule chance of staying up for Leeds. It's all going against Leeds. Leeds are the final team looking to create another miraculous story on the final day by escaping relegation on the final day of the season for the second successive season. It will be a truly amazing story if possible, as Leeds need a lot of favours elsewhere for that to happen. They need to win against Tottenham, and Leicester to draw or lose, and ideally Everton to lose to stay up. Now, as I said earlier, they could escape if Everton draw against Bournemouth, but they would need to better their goal difference by 4 if that were to occur. As you can see, Leeds have a 3 worse off goal difference than Everton at the moment. They would need to better that by 4, which would mean they would be on minus 23. In terms of goals scored, I actually need to check that, because if they score 3 against Tottenham, will they stay up? Depends, that. They would. Leeds have a much better goals scored record. It could come down to goals scored, who knows. If Leeds win by 3-0 and Everton draw at home to Bournemouth, Leeds will stay up on goals scored. Leeds have scored 47 goals as it stands. Everton have scored 33. Wow, that adds a whole new dynamic to it. But of course, also, they need Leicester to drop points as well, Leeds. If Leicester win, then all their hard work is pointless, because they're not going to better their goal difference by 9, and Leicester have already scored more goals than them, so that's irrelevant too. They're not just not going to do that. So the thing is, what makes Leeds' chances of staying up much more difficult is that they have two teams in between them, rather than Leicester only have one game needing to go their way for them to stay up. And I think that's the difficulty for Leeds, the fact that they need two results to go their way against teams Bournemouth and West Ham that have nothing to play for. As you can see, they're both in comfortable positions at the moment, the safety. They don't need to do anything, West Ham and Bournemouth. If they do, it'll be a crazy story, but that's why it looks such a small chance for Leeds to stay up, because they need two teams that have nothing to play for to get big results away at teams that have everything to play for. And that's exactly why Leeds are in a difficult position. Now, in terms of the game, in the 29 previous Premier League meetings, Leeds have just won 11 times against Spurs, with 8 of those coming at Elland Road. Tottenham have won 12 times against Leeds, with only 3 coming of those coming away from home. That probably helps Leeds. Leeds have lost all of the last 3 meetings against Spurs, conceding 10 goals collectively in those games. Leeds' last win against Spurs came in May 2021 at Elland Road, winning by 3-1. Leeds have drawn their last 2 home games. However, if they were to do that again, they will be playing Championship football next season, as it would not be enough to secure safety, no matter what the results elsewhere. Tottenham have lost their last 2 away games against Aston Villa and Liverpool, and only won 1 of their last 5 Premier League games, with that coming against Crystal Palace at home. Adding to another part of the story, Spurs can still get European football, by the way, and we'll talk about that in a moment. They can still get European football, and that would add another twist in the tail on the final day, with this game certainly being the one of the more interesting ones if something bizarre were to happen. Yeah, as I was saying, you know, Leicester or Tottenham could still get European football, and I'm going to show you the permutations before I show you the table. Talk about the fight for Europe right now, but that is the relegation battle. Everton, Leicester, and Leeds. Huge day on Sunday to decide all of that. Which one of those 3 goes down? For the fight for Europe then, so 3 teams can still qualify for 7th place in the Premier League: Aston Villa, Tottenham and Brentford. And in a similar way, Aston Villa in the driving seat. Aston Villa will qualify for Europe if they win against Brighton at home. They beat Brighton on Sunday, they will be in the Europa Conference League next season. Tottenham will get 7th if they win against Leeds and Aston Villa fail to beat Brighton at home. Brentford, though, will finish 7th if they win against Manchester City, who have nothing to play for, and Tottenham and Aston Villa fail to win. So it's quite similar in terms of the relegation battle as well. Aston Villa in the driving seat like Everton. Tottenham need a team above them to kind of drop points, and they win, and they'll be in the top 7. And Brentford really need a bit of a miracle, because they need to beat the current champions and hope that Tottenham and Villa win, or fail to win, against teams ultimately. Well, I mean, there are difficult teams. Leeds have quite a lot to play for in terms of relegation, and Brighton want to keep their pride and have a good end of the season. I don't know. But the fight for Europe is another big story for the weekend. Those are our 2 main stories: the fight for Europe and the relegation battle. All the rest are really dead rubber games, but a game's a game. But those 2 will be the key stories for the weekend. And looking at the table, get the table up for you now, because this is what makes it more interesting as well. If you look at this, there's goal difference involved here as well. Aston Villa and Tottenham, the goal difference is identical, +4 goal difference. Now, Tottenham have scored much more goals. They've scored 17 more goals than Villa, and that would probably go in their favour if, say, Villa lose and Tottenham draw. Then Tottenham will be in the top 7, because, well, of course, they will have a better. No, the goal difference wouldn't matter then. What am I talking about? It doesn't really matter. But the goal difference would be a key factor if anything comes that close towards the end of the weekend. But Brentford would have the better advantage, because they have a +11 goal difference, and if results go their way, they would be in the top 4. Because if Aston Villa draw and Tottenham lose, if Aston Villa draw and Brentford win, yes, they'll be on the same number of points, but Brentford would have that advantage in goal difference. So it's still a tough one to call. but it looks like Aston Villa could be the team that will be playing in Europe next season with Unai Emery, who's done a fantastic job. Fantastic job, Unai Emery. By the way, when this goes live at 5 o'clock this afternoon, the team of the season awards for the LFS will be picked up at 6 o'clock. So you will have 1 hour to vote if you're watching this as it goes live. 1 hour to get your votes in, and the votes will close. We will collect the results, and the results will be confirmed on Sunday's stream for the Premier League final day of our season awards as well, or your season awards as picked by you, the fans, the voters at home. Right, that is the LFS podcast this week on the final Premier League week of the season. Don't forget to follow us on social media as well, Twitter, Instagram and TikTok at LF Streams 2 on all of those platforms. And we will be back for another LFS podcast next week, but also a special show next week as well for the Premier League season review show. I'll be going through the overachievers, underachievers, the champions and the relegated all Monday at 5 o'clock. That will go live on LFS. So do you join us for that on Monday? But for me, this afternoon on the LFS podcast, have a very good weekend and enjoy the rest of the season, what's left of it. See you next week.